we started thinking like, how can we best inform our customers that this is, well, of course, first of all, something that might be impacting their applications, and how can we also make sure that they have a workaround or a solution to prevent that.
There's no events anymore, right? So we actually focused a lot more on how can we reach developer communities online, even more than we did before. So we, let's say, really focused on, for example, launching our Twitch channel, during which you can also follow and see how our APIs can be used.
As soon as a developer comes to our portal, when or how much time does it take him to make his first API call? And I think that's a great way of measuring your onboarding experience. And if you can see that decreasing because of all the efforts that the team is doing, that's really something that pays off.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 3 of the API Resilience podcast. Today, we are speaking with 2 guests from TomTom. We're speaking with Gregory de Jans and Julija Babre. I hope I got your names right. But Julija, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Your role at TomTom.
Yeah, sure. I'm working in the product marketing department of TomTom within the enterprise business unit. So actually there we work closely with a lot of our teams across the company to bring APIs to all the developers out there. And I work very closely with Gregory to also make our developer portal grow and make sure our developers can, our developer community is growing and getting everything they need to succeed in their own business.
Excellent. Thank you. And Gregory?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Gregory, and I'm heading the developer portal team within TomTom, which basically means that, well, my team is responsible for providing a good user experience to our developers, meaning that we do UX design, we do portal development, we make sure that the right tools is there, that we have the right tutorials, and that we also technically support our developers. So we have different channels. They can reach out to us via some kind of a form on the website, but also through a forum. And then, of course, we make sure that their questions are answered in a timely way, but also in a qualitative way. So that's in a nutshell where me and my team are responsible for.
So, and I'm really excited about having you on the podcast because, like, TomTom has been one of my favorite API stories because I think it's been so inspiring how from, I think, what I knew as a device company, I've seen like more and more you come into the community and take a leadership role in what it means to make a good developer portal and what it means to build a business, like an API business out of a more traditional business. And I thought that was super, super inspiring and exciting. And so I'm really happy to have you on the podcast. And especially also, I think, because your industry, you're connected with automotive and like in the whole COVID era, like that's definitely one of the industries that's been hit quite badly. I just knew that you would have really interesting stories to tell about how you've been reacting on that and how you've been, doing the anti-fragile thing to help your partners get through this better, maybe seeing new opportunities grow and things like that. Could you maybe tell a little bit more about how the last couple of months have been for you? Do you have any stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I think when you look at our developer program or our API program, of course, the last couple of months have been challenging, but also have been creating opportunities, right? So I think, like you mentioned, for example, with automotive, there's some impact because factories closed. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of opportunities because we saw that people had to also change the way that they were doing business. And for example, if you had a restaurant, then a lot of these restaurants moved to online food deliveries. So of course, with online food deliveries, there's again the need for a location-based service, and people need to know where they need to deliver their goods, how much time it will take them, whether there will be any traffic jams along the road or not. So I think even though that some parts of the business were impacted, I think there were a lot of parts in the business that also perceived these opportunities as being exciting. And that's, of course, where we also immediately focused on, right? So how can we make great products for those people who have, let's say, new business cases, people who are especially interested in on-demand use cases and delivery use cases, because they all required location data. And that was, of course, very exciting for us. So we made sure that we, first of all, had the right data, the right APIs, the right formats for these people so that they could integrate it into their applications. And also, I mean, if you look at our business in total, meaning the number of API calls, the number of users that we have on our platform, we didn't see a big decrease there because, of course, some companies, there's less movement, so some companies were impacted. But like I said, other companies were having a lot of great and new opportunities because of the crisis. And we saw a lot of new people onboarding on our platform, people, for example, who already tried the APIs before, who didn't try the APIs before, but now had an opportunity to finally try them out. People also had a bit more time, so that might also be an opportunity for people to try something out that they had on their wish list for quite a long time. So we actually saw that, this was, although some parts of our businesses that we serve are impacted, that for other parts of our business, this was a really nice opportunity to build products that could serve perhaps even a different type of audience than we have been serving before.
Would you say that's like, could you imagine going through this crisis without the API program? Like, what kind of impact did the API program have on the business, do you think? Was this something that made you more able to adapt? Like, do you think there were more innovations that were possible because of the API program?
For sure, I think TomTom has been transitioning for quite a while now, right? So I think, like you said, everyone knows TomTom as being, initially a hardware company with the GPS sat-nav devices that we have been providing to our consumers. But since quite some years already, TomTom is actually transitioning from a hardware to a software company. But not only that, it's also moving from an offline world to an online world. And the APIs, of course, are influencing that quite a lot. And with that transition, I think you could say that the crisis actually accelerated our transition because a lot of businesses are also moving online. And with these businesses moving online, they are looking for location-based services that they can also use in their online application. So I think the crisis was actually a nice opportunity for us to even accelerate our transition that we have been doing already for quite some years. So in that aspect, I think it's actually been a helping hand to make sure that we could even better serve the businesses out there.
One of the things that you said that I hadn't really thought about was developers with some time on their hands. And to me, that's a real opportunity that having your dev portal up and running, you were already poised to take advantage of that. Have there been challenges that having these new developers and potentially new applications that you hadn't considered? Have you seen those? And if so, how have you addressed them?
Yeah, so I think, there's always challenges in a developer portal, right? So I think one of the goals that we have as a developer portal team is to reduce the friction that people encounter on their journey to implement our APIs. And you sometimes see friction when people try to register for your APIs. You can see friction when people, for example, are looking for the right documentation that they need. So like you said, we had already removed a lot of friction that we saw throughout the years. And of course, it's a continuous exercise. So it's not something that you can be extremely happy with. If there's still some friction left, you always strive to remove that last part of the friction in their journey. But I think whether you are in an industry which is now coming up because of the crisis, or whether you were in an industry that, for example, boomed before the crisis, for us, that didn't make a big difference. I think every developer is kind of onboarding in the same way. Of course, you could see over the last years, but that's not specifically to the crisis, that there's much more interest in mobile development, in web development, and raw API usage is perhaps something that people are less likely to use. So more and more people are looking for SDKs because that's what it really makes it easy for them to integrate the API. So that's also something we have been focusing on already. But of course, something that kept us busy during the crisis is we wanted to make sure that we still offer high quality products. And one of the high quality products that TomTom is known for is providing accurate estimated travel times, or ETAs as we call them. And you can imagine TomTom is using historical traffic data to, let's say, predict how fast people will get to their destination. And that historical traffic data all of a sudden became useless when nobody is still moving. So when you think that there will be a traffic jam, because historically there was always a traffic jam, for example, on a specific road, well, all of a sudden nobody was still moving, so there were no traffic jams anymore. So one thing that kept us busy, of course, was to make sure that our developers still got accurate travel times, and that historical traffic information was actually not taken into account anymore during that crisis. So we started thinking, like, how can we best inform our customers that this is, well, of course, first of all, something that might be impacting their applications, and how can we also make sure that they have a workaround or a solution to prevent that. And then we started working very closely with also our marketing team to make sure that we can send down a nice communication. We worked together with our developers to make sure that this was reflected in the documentation. So yeah, in the end, you always want to make sure that our developers perceive TomTom as a high quality brand that they can trust. So we could not afford to have any damage, let's say, in the quality of our products as well, because that could, of course, reflect the trust building. And that's why I think we started actively looking for these kind of product quality issues which might have impacted our user experience. But luckily, we got ahead of our developers and we started thinking on their behalf, which is always a good reflex, I think, to do in these kind of situations.
So, and Julia, like, because you mentioned just before we came on the call that this also had a big impact on like the kind of marketing efforts that you were doing. Could you maybe tell a little bit more about that? Like we know because we also switched to a digital format for our events, but how did that affect like your job and what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. Well, actually, for us as well, what we did is there's no events anymore, right? So we actually focused a lot more on how can we reach developer communities online, even more than we did before. So we, let's say, really focused on, for example, launching our Twitch channel, during which you can also follow and see how our APIs can be used. And we also actually put a lot of effort into making sure that when developers have, let's say, a challenge they're dealing with, or in these times they're building something new, or they have a challenge that they need to address, that we're always there. We're humble and helpful to really be there for them, to help them build what they're building. And also we focused a lot on educational content. So we made sure that there's as many tools and help out there for developers so they can get through whatever they're building, whatever they need. And of course, we saw as well that what Gregory already mentioned, sometimes we foresaw that there's a potential challenge with some of the APIs. So we made sure that there's a workaround, there's enough information, everybody's informed, everybody's equipped. And that's been quite an interesting journey, and also very, it's great to be able to help them.
I'm curious to know if you're seeing different types of developers. Obviously, logistics, you guys were huge in the logistics market, supporting any aspect of transportation, and those guys haven't slowed down. Just to tie into the comment that Gregory made about the traffic situation, I was recently traveling in the US, and things have opened up here, perhaps prematurely. And I heard some commentary by some truckers that they sure missed it when everyone was staying at home. And so we may be getting closer to some of those historical traffic patterns in different parts of the US. But outside of logistics, are you seeing different types of developers and new personas that you didn't anticipate? And if so, are you having to adjust anything for those types of people?
Well, what was very interesting for us is that, of course, we saw that some businesses evolved and they changed, right? So, for example, restaurants, which were never doing deliveries before, they switched very quickly to having deliveries, being online, being available, finding different business models that they work with. Even some restaurants, from what we've seen, they came up with completely new concepts, right? Like, for example, shipping ingredients, so you can cook the same thing at home as you would have in a restaurant. So, of course, all of that involves movement, and all of that needs to be delivered and organized, and somehow also delivered at, let's say, at the expectation of a customer, that it has to be the same day or maybe the next day, but within that half an hour, and that has to be precise. So we saw that some businesses evolved, of course. When it comes to specific, whether we saw new types of developers, I would have to ask also Gregory if you saw from your team. Did you see any observations on that?
Well, not specifically to the crisis, I think. I mean, we have had quite an extensive support already for APIs, right? So we have a mobile SDK for Android, for iOS. We have a web SDK and JavaScript. So in terms of types of development or applications, we were already covering quite a large portion of let's say, the developers out there. But something that we do see, which is kind of a trend in the last year, is that there's also quite a lot of new developers with a background in different technologies like Xamarin, Flutter. So these are all, let's say, SDKs or APIs. Well, I would say the current API and SDK business is not really adapted yet to what these developers need. And you can see that there are some open source initiatives going on to make sure that these developers also find their way. But I do think that's something that we definitely need to take up in our developments, in our roadmap activities, to make sure that there's not only, let's say, the default mobile development frameworks that we're currently supporting, but that there's also more support for people who are just coming out of university, high school, who are more used to, let's say, to build frameworks in or to build applications in Xamarin, Flutter, Ionic. You need to make sure that you keep up with all these technologies, because if you make it too difficult for a developer to integrate your APIs in a platform or language that they prefer, you will probably not make them happy. And in the end, everyone wants a happy customer.
Last year, TomTom won the overall DevPortal Awards. So now I think I love that story, as I mentioned that already. But what was, I think I've heard you talk about one technique that you've used to really get the whole organization involved, maybe also from both of your sides, to make sure that the content is engaging for all the different personas that are visiting the DevPortal. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, what's your secret sauce? How do you win the DevPortal Awards?
Yeah. So, of course, there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes, right? So, winning the Developer Portal Awards was a great achievement, and I think we're all very proud of it. And the nice thing is that we could also share it internally with everyone who contributed to that. And it's not only my team, it's not only Julija and her team, but it's a lot of developers internally who have contributed to the success. It's a lot of people, technical writers who actually know what they're doing and know their audience. So to tell you a little bit the story on how we approached, let's say, the ownership of the developer portal, is that of course there's a technical team who's implementing all the features, all the tools, all the pages. But besides that, we worked with page owners, and every page owner was kind of a specialist in the domain that page was intending. So we have, for example, a pricing manager, and she's responsible for the pricing page. We have product marketing managers like Julija, and they are responsible for all the product pages, the use case pages that we have on our portal, because they know best what their audience is looking for. So they have done a lot of investigation in personas, in who is their audience, who are the markets that they're serving, what are the markets looking for. So a developer doesn't always know, let's say, all the insights of a market. So the developer is really good in developing new stuff, new features, and making sure that it's usable for another developer. But telling a story, I think that's something which is really well done by a product marketing manager. And that's also, of course, why they are with the company. So every page on the portal has a page owner. And then, of course, that page owner is responsible if they want to create a new page or change something to an existing page. They are responsible for the success of that page. So we also have KPIs. We make sure, for example, if we launch new products, that we know, like, hey, this is how we want to announce it. This is how we want to measure in the end whether a product has been successfully released or not. And I think that helps to take more ownership and to make sure that you have more helping hands as well within a company to actually serve your developer portal. And it also feels like a lot of people are engaged and they feel very closely involved with the developer portal because they are owning one or more of the pages on the portal. And like I said, we have, it's not only pricing manager and the product marketing managers, but there's developers who are actually writing documentation, which is then being reviewed by a technical writer and then in the end published by another team. So even small things like updating the documentation takes a few teams, but they all add value to the end result for the developer. And even when we do, for example, and recently we have redesigned our dashboards on the developer portal. And we were noticing that there was a bit of friction when developers were using our dashboard, and that not always all the concepts were clearly explained. So even there, we had our UX designer who went looking for external developers who had nothing to do with TomTom APIs, but she gave them a couple of proposals, of designs on how we could approach it. Then, of course, all the user research that we've put in there, in the end, we had a very nice result. But it's not just one developer changing a page. I mean, it's a UX developer who's basically involved with a user research study. A few iterations have followed. Then, there's a design. We try it out with let's say some A/B tests to see how it works with our developers. And then in the end, of course, you see a brand new page. But if you look at all the work that has happened before, that's quite impressive. And it always impresses me how closely the team is working together and how everyone is taking up that ownership to make a page or to make a user flow in the end more attractive and better for our developer community.
Yeah, so to add to that as well, so I am an owner of one of the pages there, and what is actually great is to see that, of course, to make the page work, we do work with all these teams, and also we consult that when developers are searching for something, what words are they using? Can we make sure that they found our page, because we want to make sure that they find as quickly as possible what they're looking for, but also we give back, right? So for example, I've seen many product owners being very excited when I show that, hey, you've developed this API or this new functionality. This is the demo that's on the portal. What do you think about it? So it's also about giving back and involving also product managers and showing this is how we present your products. This is the stories that we tell. Is it in line? And always checking with them if that's how they want to tell the story as well. So it's knowing the outside, but also making sure that internally we involve all the stakeholders throughout the whole journey, so they also know what's happening. So when there's new products, we now have already product managers also asking us, hey, can we make an announcement here or add it to this page? And I think it's quite nice to see, and it's because they're involved throughout the process as much as possible, especially when we make changes. And then indeed the ownership also helps to monitor, and like I would reach out, for example, within Gregory's team, I would reach out to the UX designer thinking like, hey, can we observe if actually this tutorial or anything else is getting attention? Because I think it's useful for developers, and if it is, would be great if they notice. And if it's not, let's replace it with something that they're looking for. So it's always work in progress and checking inside and outside whether we're on the right track.
Yeah, and then perhaps one more thing to add, which you brought up, Julija, is indeed everything which relates to SEO, right? So I think for a technical developer portal, that's often something which is kind of forgotten or not being focused enough. But I think there's a lot of added value if you really optimize your portal or parts of your portal for SEO, because in the end, if people want to understand, for example, what is a good, well, in our case, routing API or directions API or a search or geocoding API, one of the first thing they'll do is they go to Google and they type in search API or geocoding API. So not everyone knows TomTom, for example, as being an API provider. So in terms of building awareness and making sure that people know you for the products that you're offering, we also spend quite some time and effort in SEO. And we do have a very good SEO expert in our team as well. And he's helping us a lot to make sure that whenever we publish something, it first gets reviewed by our SEO specialist. And then he understands what people are looking for, and he knows what are popular keywords, for example. So he makes sure that they are one way or the other included in what we're trying to tell our audience, without, of course, changing the story, right? There's always a balance you need to find, but we always make sure that whatever we create and whatever we publish is something which is also easy for Google to index, and that the pages on the portal are lightweight to make sure that they load faster, which also has an impact on SEO and on your ranking. So I think there's a lot of things that come into play when you're looking at the entire user experience of a developer portal.
Yeah. And also from marketing perspective, right? Because sometimes, let's say, if you have a good expert like what we have on SEO, you also can get pointers to new things that people are eager to learn about or are searching for, and to make sure that we have that educational content that goes with it. So that's also something what has happened before, is that sometimes even before creating the page, we do consult to make sure that the message is right, but also that we have all the educational content that's required for that.
I'm just struck here as we're having this conversation about you guys are hitting some of the points that we try to make in terms of introducing people to best practices. You're making them in ways that demonstrate the kind of leadership that won you the DevPortal Awards. Everything from quality content to reducing friction. Even the SEO story that you just shared with us is a story about reducing friction. I mean, helping people get to you. It's huge to make that easy, and you guys are doing a great job with that. You've talked about trust and being humble and helpful. These are all really good, and I can see from what you were saying that that analytics are really important. And I'm interested in, you obviously have a very developer experience focused program. So do you think that that's responsible, your focus on developer experience? Do you think that's responsible for the success that you're achieving through your program?
Yeah, partially. I think there's, of course, a lot of things which are important for the success of a program. I think, first of all, you need to make sure that you have the buy-in from the management. I think that's where it all starts, right? So if you have a company which is, let's say, treating an API program as some kind of a sidetrack, then I think it's really hard to get your focus, to get a focused team who is able to do all that stuff. So I think Julija and I already said it a couple of times. We have a very dedicated and powerful team who is helping us with every part of the business. So of course you need to have developers because the developers need to develop the products. You have product managers who tell the story to the market. You have the product managers who make sure that you have great products. You have a technical writer who can optimize the documentation. And I mean, a few years ago, we also started with a very small team, and APIs was not really, let's say, the core part of the business for TomTom. And you can see that, yeah, you need to start somewhere, right? So you start focusing, for example, on the developer documentation, but then you see like, wow, we're probably missing some really nice pages that people can actually relate to and that they can find a fit with the use case that they have in mind. So every time you make some progress, you also, at the same time, by measuring and by doing more and more analytics, you notice like, hey, there's a few gaps that we still need to solve. And of course, if you then have a very dedicated and focused team on an API program, I think you can do a lot. If you have a team which is not really focused on the API program and who has a lot of other things to do, that's where we saw in the past that sometimes it's harder to achieve your objectives, and that having a dedicated team is something which really can help you to speed up your API program. But then, of course, that requires the buy-in from the management, which is key.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is how you tell if you're being successful in helping your developers. For instance, Julija, you mentioned the performance of a particular demo or tutorial. What are the best ways that you're finding to connect with your developers and to bring them up to speed? And how do you measure the success of helping a developer use your APIs?
Well, there are a couple of things here that come to mind, and first is, of course, having the attitude of being helpful and being there for all the answers they have, and having the tools to do that. So we do have a blog that we do make sure that we address sufficient mix of pieces about what's happening in the market, pieces on tutorials and how to use our APIs for things that matter and how to do that. So we have actually 2 developer evangelists who are working on writing these things and also connecting to developers directly, and then working together with product owners to make sure it's top notch, how it should be there as a tutorial. Also being actually having an active forum that we have as well, is that developers feel that there's a platform where they can engage to get answers, to ask questions, to know about the latest things, and that to have this very short connection to, let's say, our teams to get support that they need. And that's, of course, on top of having already good documentation and having good explanation of the use cases, good explanation of the products, and also taking into account what you mentioned before, knowing who is your audience and who isn't. So we work with personas, so we make sure that we have different pages that talk in different languages. So if it's a product manager, we explain it in a way that it's understandable to them. If it's, let's say, a developer, we make sure they have the answers to their questions, but also knowing which audiences are not there and which ones need different approaches. So that's at least from, let's say, marketing perspective. I think Gregory can also give an insight in what it looks like from more inside the developer portal.
Yeah. So I think, well, when it comes to feedback, there's actually two ways of capturing feedback, right? So you have active feedback and you have passive feedback. And what I understand from active feedback is, like Julia was mentioning, right? So we have a forum where people can share their opinions. And I mean, developers are really honest and they share whatever they want, right? So they will not say you have a slightly good product. They will say you have a crappy product if they don't like it. So of course, that's something you need to accept. And a forum, I mean, you get all kind of feedback on a forum. And the most important thing is that you get feedback, right? Because there's nothing worse than actually getting no feedback from your developers. So I think having a developer who's sharing their feedback is already very valuable. Other ways to get active feedback is like we have a contact us form where people can directly reach out to us. We also do developer interviews. So our product marketing team is actually actively involved interviewing developers, not only the happy ones, but also the ones who, for example, left after a couple of months. We want to understand why they leave. We want to understand, of course, what they liked, what they didn't like. And I think that's important to understand. So having that active feedback is, I think, one of the things, and hopefully you can get into a conversation with a developer and ask him a couple of more details, but that's really valuable. The other part is the passive feedback. And there's all kind of tools and metrics that you can use to measure passive feedback. And one of the, let's say, the most important metrics that we are using is the time to first API call. So as soon as the developer comes to our portal, when or how much time does it take him to make his first API call? And I think that's a great way of measuring your onboarding experience. And if you can see that decreasing because of all the efforts that the team is doing, that's really something that pays off. Other metrics, of course, well, there's all kind of tools like Google Analytics, which can help you to see where people are stuck in the flow. If they, for example, visit 2 pages, but then almost nobody registers, you know that there's something wrong with your flow for people to get them onboarded. We also have payments and e-commerce modules on our developer portal, so you can also see there what works, where people get stuck, and in the end, where you need to improve. Other tools are like heat maps for your portal, right? So if you see like people are only looking at the top screen and they don't scroll back, and there's an important part of your messaging below the fold, then you know that there's something wrong with your portal, right? So you need to make sure that people see the content that you really want them to see. And these tools, of course, help you to monitor that, not in an active way, so you will not get the active feedback, but you will get the feedback passively. And we also integrate some tools to make sure that people can share their feedback on each page of our portal, right? So there's some kind of feedback button that you will find on every page, and they can share how happy they are with that page, whether they have any comments, whether they have any suggestions for improvement. And I mean, all that feedback. So it requires a bit of effort, of course, to get that feedback, but it's really valuable. And the insights you get from it are really valuable to improve your entire user experience throughout the portal.
There's one interesting part here, or well, there's a lot of interesting parts, but one thing that jumps out to me, because I typically, when I meet customers the first time, I always tell them, be careful with forums. Like you don't want to create a ghost town. Because I see a lot of people approach it. They think that forum is free support. You know, we're going to do this technology thing, and then people will answer their own questions. Awesome. How was your experience with that? Because it sounds like, well, you're heavily going into everything, and you're putting a lot of resources on making sure things work. So I'm sure that's not what you did. Like, did you have a community manager, or how did you jumpstart your forum? How did that work?
Yeah, well, before we actually started with our own forum, we also, of course, had some brainstorming sessions like, should we use our own forum? Should we make use of existing forums? Because you can never avoid that people go to Stack Overflow or any other forum that they are used to, right? So I think that's something you need to be cognizant of. But in the end, we also asked our community, like, would you appreciate a TomTom developer forum, or would you still prefer to go out to the forum that you have been using already for quite some time? And the feedback that we got is, we would appreciate a TomTom dedicated forum, because it can help us to find all the information we need to integrate your APIs in one place. And there's not other questions which can distract us. But the one condition that they had is it needs to be supported by TomTom specialists as well. I mean, developers who can really support us and answer our questions, because if we get some high-level feedback or people are not able to help us, then of course this will not work. So then we decided, indeed, together with our community manager, that we're gonna take the forum approach. And well, the forum is creating a bit of a different experience than we have on the developer portal as well. It's a bit more playful. So we have some badges that you can earn, for example. So it's more interactive and more playful environment than our developer portal. But it allows people to basically exchange information. And in the beginning, we saw that our own experts, well, they had to basically answer on all the questions. But over time, we see that there's now also some people from the community who are quite active on the forum and who help other developers. And I think it all has to do with developers. They want to get an answer for their questions as quickly as possible. So if they can find it in another place, they will go to the other place. If you can make sure that the developers are helped with high quality and fast responses on your own forum, then I'm pretty sure that they will prefer that spot, because it's dedicated and it's really focused on the topic that they want to ask questions about.
Also, to add to that, what I see happening inside our teams is, again, of course, there's a very big support from, let's say, Gregory's team and our developer portal team and our specialists, and also community starts to talk to each other. But also, we do see that product managers start to pay more attention. And for example, even myself, right? If I'm launching a new API, I would make an announcement on the forum as well. I would reach out to the community directly if there's a question that we can answer. So everybody's starting to chip in and have knowledge and exchange that, and also read direct feedback, right, to improve the products as quickly as possible. So also within the organization, there's it's very open for, let's say, everybody who's working on APIs to be informed what's happening on the forum, to share their knowledge wherever it can be useful and helpful, and just share the news directly there. So it's that's also one of the things. This definitely helps to not being a ghost town, but a lot of teams seeing it as a very valuable communication tool and participating.
I'm curious to go a little further with this, because Kristof asked the same question I was thinking about. But how many people and in what roles at TomTom are actively watching and participating in the forum? And is it ad hoc, or do you have people assigned to follow the forum?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we basically have a number of people who are really dedicated and who monitor the questions that come in on the forum. And then there's also people who are not dedicated, but who are just passionate about following the topics on the forum. And Julija already mentioned, like, product managers, right? They are very proud of what they're bringing and delivering to the market. And of course, if somebody, or if they feel like somebody is having a question or is doubting the quality of the API, or they don't know how to use a specific feature, then you can see them becoming very active as well, because they want to make sure that their products are usable and that their customers can use it, and that they know how to get the best out of these APIs. And then, of course, there's also the developers who are actually working to deliver these great products. They're also proud about what they have delivered, and they know the ins and the outs of every feature. They know everything under the hood, right? So, I mean, if there's really technical questions, well, sometimes we need to ask some developers, hey, can you take a look at this question? But in most cases, developers are following those conversations, and whenever they feel like, hey, now is the time for me to jump in here, they do that as well. And that's what makes it really interesting, right? So it's not just one person who's following all the questions, but we can see that there's a lot of people who are actually closely following all the questions that come into the forum. And actually, something which I really liked in the last couple of months is that even the product managers, when they wanted to find out, for example, what was a nice feature to add to their products, they also use the forum to get in touch with the community. So it's not only the community who reaches out to some people from TomTom experts, but it's also the TomTom experts internally. If they need some feedback, if they need some help to, for example, prioritize their roadmap, they can also do that through the forum. And that's what I like. It's not a one-way communication. It works both ways. And even within the community, we see that there's interactions and communication. So that's really great to see.
I want to ask a slight change of tack, and we're also nearing our time mark. One of the things that I found really intriguing from meeting and talking since early on in the journey is that TomTom is kind of special because you're part of the sales department. Is that correct? Like you're not part of the engineering department, right?
Yeah, so we are in a business unit, right? So
Yeah.
TomTom has product units and business units, and the product units, of course, are developing all our products. But we are in a business unit because, we actually we own the go-to-market channel for products. So we own the messaging, the story, let's say the audience. How do we want to attract developers? Which kind of audience do we need to focus on? And that is something which, of course, requires a lot of close cooperation with the people in the product units. But it also requires a very close involvement with the business because there's a tight link also to what our salespeople are actually doing. So, a couple of our customers who are also using the APIs are Microsoft and Verizon. I mean, these customers also come in through the portal, and the experience that they have with the portal will also, let's say, impact the perception that they will have of the product. So it's the first interaction they have with the TomTom product, right, which is the developer portal. But in the end, if that is a poor experience, they will also probably not like or have a wrong perception about what's under the hood and what products are actually offered through the portal. So that's why we think it's really important that you have a good go-to-market strategy. And of course, you have a sales marketing team, but also it's a mixture from the portal perspective, right? You have technical people, marketing people, sales people. And they all work closely together to make sure that it's not seen as the developer portal, which is making sure that you can serve these small developers. But no, the developer portal is actually the go-to-market channel for our Maps APIs, and also the large customers who are, for example, and not coming in with their credit card to make some transactions, but these large customers, well, they also read the documentation on the portal and they follow kind of the same journey as smaller companies do. So it's important that I think you are closely related, or you have a good interaction with those sales and marketing teams, because in the end you want to make sure that you also enhance that experience that they want to provide as a business unit. And that's why I think it's really great, and I don't really see it as something which is strange. On the contrary, I think it's really good that we're part of a business unit and that we, for that part, understand the business and where the business is going to.
And I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing. I think it's a really good thing, because I think one of the keys to DevPortal maturity is business alignment. And so now I wonder if this alignment that you have with the business, how important has that been to getting the buy-in from management, like that, to making the API program as important as it is today?
Well, of course, it helps if, let's say, if the portal is also helping the business and the salespeople, then you have a much better story than a portal which stands on itself within an organization. And for example, our portal, we are now focused a lot on generating leads for the sales team. So people who are reaching out to us, who say like, hey, I have this kind of volume, I want to move from another provider to TomTom. Can you please help me? And then, most often these cases are being sent to a sales representative, and then they are picking that up. So I think it's important when you define your API strategy that it's not looked at as, let's say, a strategy on itself, the developer portal and what you're doing with it, but I think it needs to fit within a business story. And that's of course what we are also doing within TomTom, is we make sure that the Maps APIs are actually a product that we very much believe in as a company, as a business unit. And the portal is an important part because it serves every customer who will be using the Maps API or who is currently using the Maps APIs. So definitely that helps to get the buy-in from the management, because you can show that there's a lot of value and that every customer who wants to use your product, one way or the other, they will interact with the developer portal.
Indeed, and I think to add to that as well is because we're in a business unit, there's also all the knowledge of the entire TomTom portfolio, right? So if a customer comes and they have a specific use case and some of it is APIs, maybe some of it is also other types of data that they need, then actually our, say, support teams and sales teams and they would really know how to answer that use case and give the best of what TomTom has to offer, right? So it's also really, like what Gregory said, it's a contact point for all the customers, and the knowledge that is behind the portal is of the entire TomTom.
Thank you very much. I think, this is an awesome conversation. I don't know if you have any last things to add, something that you want to give a shout out about, or something we should pull attention to for the audience.
Well, one of the things that we can definitely mention is that, like I mentioned in the very beginning, we are quite active in the new channel that we have, which is Twitch. Mm-hmm. For developers, and in the coming episodes we will also be announcing some other channels that we are active on. So I would encourage to follow that and let's say stay on top of the news and see what's coming. So there's definitely like a practical, let's say, comment on where to get more news on what is coming from TomTom.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're also very much hoping for another Developer Portal Award. I think it has been a great experience to win a Portal Award, and we've even seen people looking at TomTom as some kind of an industry benchmarks when it comes to developer portals, which of course was giving the team an enormous boost, right? So I think we're looking forward to those awards again, and hopefully we can again win some prizes. So that's why we're doing all this hard work to make sure that we keep on setting the bar for the developer portals.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Mark?
You guys are doing a really great job, and I learned an awful lot from this conversation. And I know a lot about your business, and I know a lot about developer portals, and it was really great to hear so many interesting takes on that. So thank you very much for joining us today. I know that this is going to be a useful episode for people, and it's encouraging to hear that even through these difficult business climates, that you guys are doing well, that your company is continuing to invest, and that you're reaping benefits from that investment. And so that's a great bit of news to get out there, a ray of sunshine, if it were. So thank you.
And thanks for inviting us for this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the API Resilience podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for our latest episodes. You can contact us at podcast@pronovix.com, and until next time, be well.